Shalom, welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Nachman Simon with the Chabad House of Delmar, together with my co-host Mark Ronig of Statewide News Service, jbiztechphilly.com, and now columnist for the Jewish Press.
Yep, I'm having fun doing all three assignments, and my column in the Jewish Press is called Albany Beat, and I talk about how government relates to the Jewish community, or doesn't, as the case may be. But our guest today is Mike Durant from National Federation of Independent Businesses, and the New York chapter.
Correct.
And and you know how government relates to small businesses, so that's what we're going to talk about today, whether government relates to small businesses or doesn't, as the case may be.
Right. So, well, thank you both for having me.
Well, my first question is what you generally hear. I'm not a businessman, I'm a rabbi, but that the small businesses are going under. You got the big box businesses, so your five and dime little stores at the corner are more and more going under, or even restaurants, they're all become franchises. I mean, as a franchise person, a small business, and on one hand it is, but on one hand it's part of a big
conglomerate.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think that it is somewhat of an unfortunate reality that as the years tick by, small businesses all across New York, there seems to be fewer and fewer. When you get in your car and you drive through any community in upstate New York and even in down, you see a lot of vacant commercial property, and often it is a small business. Some of that is on the skill of the entrepreneur, obviously, but some of it is the business environment, the climate that the state and that government really creates, that the business owner has to deal with. And as we see in New York, a typical small business profits right around, say, 1% to 4%. And over the last few years especially, Albany hasn't been very kind to small business. I think most of my members, and I represent 11,000 across New York, would say Albany hasn't been very kind to them in decades. But the last few years have been hard, and it's really driven a stake through that finite profit margin that a small business has.
Now, you grew up in New York State?
Correct.
Do you find that over the years that it's become more friendly under this administration or less friendly? Because the Governor Cuomo promotes that, it's business is business, it's important, we have to keep striving for employment, and, he's giving tax breaks, and do you find that it's hyperbole and it's bluster, or is it reality?
Well, the governor has done some positive things. We just had a report from the Tax Foundation last week that ranked New York 49th in business tax climate.
Is that up from 50?
Yeah. It's staying the course at 49. It was 50 5-6 years ago. A lot of that is driven by tax reform that was done a few years ago. Our corporate tax rate in New York is ranked 7th, so it's undeniable that that's not competitive relative to the rest of the country. Unfortunately, small business owners, the vast majority, the business owner pays their business taxes via the personal income tax. We have a very progressive tax code that is not overly friendly, and so small businesses there haven't received the positive benefits. As an organization, we've been opposed to Startup New York. That was providing tax-free incentives for employees and businesses for a period of time. At the time, that's not doing anything for the existing business, and we rank 49th in business tax climate. I think that too often the word business gets politicized to the point that it's great for the opponents that I tend to go up against, because when you think business, you don't think about the mom and pop shop on the corner. You think Target and Walmart and fast food franchises, the big box stores, etc. Business, the owners, the CEOs, their experience of the big boys versus the mom and pop are vastly different. And what happens with the political trade winds is when we talked this past year with minimum wage and paid leave, that disproportionately impacts a small employer, a family farm, a corner deli, a pizza place, an auto repair shop, far more than it's going to a Target, a Walmart. Yet,
no pun intended, Target or Walmart.
Yeah, right. But those folks have the financial flexibility to adapt, whereas my folks, going back to that finite profit margin, do not necessarily.
Okay, so you know what? You were against the minimum wage. Are you still against raising the minimum wage? Even though with this compromise of it going up in New York City, but not necessarily upstate at the same rate?
Yeah, two things with that. First is we just came off a minimum wage increase that was being phased in over 3 years. So 3 years ago, the minimum wage in New York was at the federal minimum of $7.25.
Right.
So we're moving up to 9. And now with this new deal, regardless if you look at the bifurcated wage between the city and Long Island versus upstate, you're looking at 9 years of a minimum wage increase.
Yeah.
We're not seeing cost reductions. Well, we're not seeing cost reductions for a business. What this equates to is a 67% increase in labor costs that a small business is going to have. With a finite market share of their product, with the finite profit margin that I discussed, we're hemorrhaging population, so the corner deli is not going to see an influx of new customers. So what are they going to do? One of three things. They're going to cut employees, they're going to close, or they're going to raise prices. And that's not really...
I have people come to me and they won't give them a lot of hours. Not again, I don't know the laws. Again, like I say, I'm not a lawyer, I'm a rabbi, but people just come complain to me that they go to a business and they just won't give them like under 20. Again, I don't want to say a number because I don't know. But everybody finds a way around the issue. They don't like part-time. Again, I'll take 2 part-times to equal 1 full-time, so I don't have to. Maybe that's for the healthcare.
Well,
that's more with the healthcare. But I think that for the business owner, at the end of the day, in small business for New York is a $950 billion hit on our economy. There's over 2 million small businesses all across the state. So any economic resurgence is going to be heavily reliant upon the health of small business. It's not just a matter of labor costs. You have, we kind of guesstimate here, about the top 5 worst or highest workers' comp costs in the country. We have top 5 energy costs in the country. Health insurance is through the roof here in New York. We just talked about the 49th or the second worst business tax climate. So all these things that small employer is dealing with, seeing no reductions anywhere there, yet now you're going to increase labor costs, which isn't just for the businesses, by the way, that pay at that minimum wage level. If you owned a business and you had 1 minimum wage employee and you had 2 making $14 and 1 making $16, as that gets moved up, there's going to be there's going to be a compression issue, and wages are going to go up.
Okay, but by the time this gets all phased in, like you said, 9 years or whatever it is, the $15 minimum wage is going to be worth $13 in today's dollars.
I think that...
So it's not really a $15 minimum wage, it's, but it's still, I mean, by the time, it's also the inflation and the what money is worth coming, I mean, I watch these old movies and, I see, a penny candy was really a penny, they give you a nickel and you get this big bag of groceries and, you look at that, but times have changed and you don't have, that nickel's not worth much anymore, or that penny. So I'm just not, in fact, it costs more to make a penny than it does the actual penny, the actual 1 cent.
Well, the other side uses an argument a lot on the inflationary figure, and they point out, I believe it's 1968. 1968, minimum wage peaked. When you looked at it, Forbes has ran this article many times as the fight for 15 has sort of went around the country, and obviously it was here in New York. When you look at with the minimum wage since its inception to now, and you use other years outside of 1968, the minimum wage is far below the $9 that it is here. It's like $8.11 or something like that. So to project where we're going to be in the future, that's too tough to tell. But they manipulate and they have good arguments, and here we are.
Okay, so I'm not saying whether I'm in favor or not. I'm just sort of having this.
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay. You also have a scorecard. How many issues did you look at over this past year?
Well, we had, we'll say roughly, we looked at a lot. We took formal position on, over the last 2-year cycle, well over 100 pieces of legislation. But at the end of the day, I mean, there's a lot of non-controversial issues that lawmakers vote in, whether one house and 2 houses. We try to largely avoid those and pick the things that we really feel, based on our members' input, would impact their business either positively or negatively. So we have roughly
10?
Yeah, 10. We have 6 in the Senate that we scored the Senate on, and when I look at the Assembly, it's about the same. So some are 2 houses, some are 1 house.
And well, I should say that in full disclosure that, when we were talking about minimum wage a minute ago, you were the assistant labor commissioner in the in 2005, 2006, associate commissioner. So you were up there in labor. I mean, you have your grasp on what the issues are. I just want people to know that you're just not a
talking head,
or a pretty face or whatever. You're just
right.
You have some real knowledge and background in the labor field itself. So that's pretty much why I brought up the minimum wage, and I just wanted to come full circle and mention that. Okay, so which of these bills really irked you the most? Whether you thought it was supposed to be passed and it wasn't, or it wasn't supposed to be passed, because you spend a lot of time killing bills that you think are anti-business also.
Just beforehand, is there a big divide between Republicans? Usually the word out there, Republicans are pro-business and Democrats are more tax and spend.
It's more conservative and liberal, because there are conservative Democrats like Robin Schimminger who are pro-business, and there are liberal Republicans that are not. So I'm just saying, I think it's more conservative and liberal, more so than Democrat Republican.
Well, and I think that, taking one step back, small business is a real popular phrase between the months of, say, August and November of even years at any level. I mean, you hear it a lot in any campaign, whether it's state and local office, the federal level. Unfortunately, and with both parties, and unfortunately that doesn't always translate into support after Election Day. But for some folks like Robin Schimminger, who is and he deserves a lot of credit because he takes a sensible approach at looking at legislation. He's not with us all the time, he's with us quite a bit. But you can have a conversation. He asks great questions about a certain piece of legislation. What's the impact on small business? What's the impact on family farms?
Does he still chair the small business committee?
Economic development, yes.
Economic development,
He's asked very important questions as it relates to economic development funding and Startup New York and the lack of transparency in economic development investment in Albany. I think that this year, because the governor's agenda was very rough, the worst thing I think that happened for small business over this cycle was the budget bill that had paid leave, that had minimum wage in that. Those were two high-profile fights that we were engaged in.
Do you get a warm reception when you want to meet with the governor's people on the second floor?
Well, I think that the relationships evolve and move in different directions. I mean, I think the governor, in his first few years when he had more of a centrist
view on
policy, and he was really good at bringing labor and business interests together in a room. We got some positive workers' comp reform and unemployment insurance reform a few years ago, and that was a large result of his leadership in bringing us together. But we're also not afraid as an organization, and I'm not afraid as the face, I guess, of New York's operation to be critical and stand up for our members, and that isn't always received very well.
No, but do they feel that they haven't shut the door on you, like when you request an appointment?
No, I've had meetings, sure.
That they see the NFIB as a real prominent organization like the Business Council? And
I think that they understand that, I don't know about prominent, but I think that I would say that they understand that the business community, we have different market shares. The Business Council has publicly traded and small business. I have no business that's publicly traded. So to help the state's economy, you can't be narrow in scope, which I would criticize that the governor has been. You need to look broad. I talked about the economic impact small business has. So I think that they will listen. But the governor's agenda is the governor's agenda, and they're very rigid on that.
But when in the State of the State message, he comes out with this pro-business philosophy that he feels is a pro-business philosophy. Do you wince when you hear this?
Yeah, because I think it has been a very targeted approach. It's been narrow. It's largely consisted of spending significant taxpayer dollars.
So you don't applaud his pro-business when that portion of the State of the State?
No, because the other things he's been pushing on his agenda, like paid leave and minimum wage, disproportionately hurt small business compared, as I described. So, yes, there was a personal income tax cut that's going to be phased in as part of this budget. Well, the small business typically might save, if it gets fully phased in, which it's Albany and it's government and you never know, might be $700, $800 in savings. But if you're a small business and you have 5, 6 employees and they're all hourly, and I've talked about the compression, it's going to eviscerate any saving there. So I find it hypocritical. The governor wants to be pro-business, but he's largely excluded small from his agenda, and he's been very specific.
Okay.
The Buffalo Billion and startup to attract business to New York, et cetera.
And with this, so getting back to my other question about which of these bills in the voting record
It would be
really
the budget
irked
bill.
you?
The budget bill.
The budget bill
That
really
had minimum
irked you?
wage and paid leave. Yeah, absolutely. And
Okay.
going even part of your question was, I think, Republicans, Democrats. I mean, the Senate Republicans voted unanimously
For the budget.
for that budget bill. And now, look, there's politics and gamesmanship that goes there. There was school aid,
Yeah.
and there are other things as part of that bill, and that's done on purpose. But
Well, Dov Hikind voted against the budget bill in the Assembly. I mean, did you applaud him for that, or did you?
I don't think that he was necessarily because of the positions that we had taken, but
Do you find that Dov Hikind's pro-business or pro-small business?
I think
or?
that when we look, and we can right here in front of us at his voting record, he had 0% with us.
So he's not pro-small
I would say
business?
based on the issues that we've taken, he hasn't been very helpful, no.
And even though he voted against the budget, I mean, wouldn't that be something
I
that?
believe he was excused when you look at this.
Well,
Yes, he was excused, or ER, which he was excused, so he wasn't present when the vote was taken.
okay, on that one budget bill
Correct,
that.
right. So that's why he's 0 as opposed to, say, a 17%.
Because it was the.
It was on Friday.
education.
And
Oh, it was on Friday,
I think
yeah.
it was on Friday.
Right, he had to get home for
Thursday night,
Shabbos,
and he
yeah.
probably had come, right. So that was the worst one.
And what about some of the, and what about Simcha Felder? How does he?
Simcha Felder on our voting record was the only member of the state Senate to have a passing grade. Passing is a 70. He had the highest score in the Senate. I believe he's about an 84%.
Oh, really? So he's one of your favorites?
He did a fantastic job.
Well, truth is, I mean, I just know from the Orthodox Jewish community in New York, I mean, they're not the Walmart executives, let's say it that way, and they are all these streets in Borough Park and Flatbush, or there really are, like you say, mom and pop businesses. He's not looking out for the big businesses. So, all these people have been on our television show here, the Jewish View, practically have all politicians, but we never asked him that, but I'm just putting into mind that that's.
Well, and I think that, he takes a very similar to Robin Schimminger. He takes a very sensible approach. He examines legislation, and he reacts to his constituents.
Did you have a position on the bag tax?
We were supportive of that bill, and Senator Felder was the chief sponsor of that bill.
Right, so you were fighting with the environmentalists on this bill. Why would you, did you craft the justification? Did you help? Because sometimes lobbying groups do that.
No, we looked at it from a few ways. First, manufacturing, and plastic manufacturing specific, is a $2 billion industry in New York. I believe it employs about 2,000 New Yorkers.
Really?
So
all
that's
made
not
in New
something.
York? I don't know that.
There's that. There's also a cost
Interesting.
impact on small business. Again, it sort of goes in the difference. If you make sudden changes, and you have a warehouse and you have boxes and boxes of plastic bags that you use, you go to any store that's typically they're going to have to eat that cost and then pay for something to be replaced. So there's a cost there. They didn't and when you talk to customers, do you want to, small business owners, they tend to have relationships with their customers,
Sure.
particularly the regulars. Do you want to pay $1 for a reusable bag? By the way, we don't know if the reusable bag is necessarily a safe environmental alternative, depending upon what it's made, to plastic.
Well, not just that, it's also not necessarily healthy in that there's germs that that build
I
up.
could think also, if I'm just thinking as a consumer, I bring a bag, I have 2 bags, so you're not gonna buy something less, so I won't buy it, I don't have the bags for it.
Yeah.
Or, it's because I would, tend not to buy more, you tend to buy less.
And I think what's really interesting with this bill, and everybody, the environment is a concern for everybody, but ultimately, New York does have a poor regulatory environment. And you have federal standards, and then New York tends to supersede federal standards, and then you're allowing localities to have another standard, and then you create a maze patchwork regulations that a business owner would have to try to decipher and then follow. And all this bill does is say we don't need to have 2,000 local standards as it relates to a plastic bag. State law will supersede a locality for making that. That's what that says. That if you're going to examine this issue, don't examine it on a case-by-case basis and have little communities deciding what's best. Let's have a state standard, have a real conversation. And too often, something becomes an issue, and maybe plastic bags in New York City are an issue. But let's not just rush in, and we see this a lot in Albany. We're going to draft a bill, we're going to rush 100 miles an hour, we're going to pass a bill, and then we're not going to spend the time to talk to all sides of the argument, to find commonality or common ground, find a sensible approach, and understand what the true impact is, and create a state standard. And I think that that's what's getting lost when Senator Felder and other supporters of this bill, of which there were many, it passed 35-24 in the Senate.
It wasn't just a party line vote?
I don't believe so, no.
Okay. So what other bills do you want to talk about that you...
Well, I mean, we looked at a few different things. Some follow a lot of our themes that we have. There was a bill that was not voted on in the Assembly, but was voted on in the Senate, that wanted the Public Service Commission to do a cost-benefit analysis on the renewal REV, which is the governor's energy vision, renewable energy vision.
Okay.
I believe, and I agree that our delivery systems and energy need to be modernized. They need to be looked at, but at the same time, what's the cost? If you go solar and wind and other renewables, what's the cost? We already have the 5th highest energy cost. Let's create transparency in the program. So that was something big.
When you say we have the 5th highest energy cost?
New York.
New York State?
Yes. Yes.
Not just New York, outside New York City?
Right,
also?
we have very high energy costs.
Because I got to tell you a story. I mean, I get people from New York City come up, and I might have my energy bill laying around the table, and they look at that and they say, "Since when do they bill you weekly?" And I'm saying, no, this is for a whole month. That's a whole month. That's my weekly. That's like,
Right.
So they're surprised because Con Ed and other utilities downstate, they charge a lot more. Yeah.
Well, we have an enormous amount of assessments. One is hopefully going to be fully phased out. It's 18A. Everybody pays it, whether you're a business owner or homeowner.
Yeah.
It's on your bill. We tend to do a lot of those things there, and to what cause, and to what end. So that was something that was big. I think the theme when we put this together too, is over the last 2 years, there wasn't a lot done.
Right.
That was particularly that was pro-business. We saw a lot of the same bills that we fight and usually are able to defeat, at least in one house or the other, come up. There wasn't a lot of focus on these issues.
So let me ask you in a final few minutes, now we got a new legislative session coming up in 2017. This goes away, these bill numbers go away. What do you see coming up for 2017? Looking into your crystal ball, you must be developing some political legislative agenda.
Well, we're looking at it, surely. I think that that'll accelerate when we see who comes back to Albany and who has control, particularly in the Senate.
Oh, okay, control you're talking about.
Control in the
Because there's
Senate.
going to be 10 new members in the Assembly.
Absolutely.
Off the top.
And I think that ultimately we look at the Senate and hope that they will become better. These scores are lower than they have been in the Senate, particularly with the Republican conference, that they become better. But we'll see if they have control. I think there's a few issues. One is called ban the box. It is the right, basically the criminal record if you were applying for a job, asking them before or after you've offered them the job. That could be something. I think state-sponsored retirement.
That's what Sam Fine was
Yeah, I
on the show
remember
talking
that,
about
but he was talking
ban the
about
box.
Albany
County. Yeah, Sam Fine, the county legislator from.
That'd be bad for business. I mean, that you may.
Well, our
have to
argument is
hire a
basically,
felon,
well, it's not so much that as it is,
So
if
you're
you were
against-
going to, yes, if you were not going to be, if you had an issue that was not going to allow you to be qualified to have that job pre-offer, then you're going to post-offer. So I think it's semantics, and honestly, New York is one of the most litigious states in the country as well.
People are going to find out.
They're going to find
anyway.
ways to
They're going to
do
find it
lawsuits.
out anyway, whether
Right.
it's before or after.
Right.
So you're saying cut to the chase and
Right.
let's find out up front,
Right.
as opposed to having to waste time in the HR process.
Well, and for a
that's
small business
my-
that has 6, 7, 8 employees, and with the costs that are associated
Yeah.
with unemployment insurance and other things, you know,
Right.
the hiring process is integral to the
Crucial.
survival of their business. Absolutely.
And that's my argument that I keep talking about to the supporters of Ban the Box. And I just know, like, every seminar that I see about HR, they're always talking about Ban the Box. And anyway, so go on.
So
to
that
the-
and a state-sponsored retirement, there was a bill that was introduced, and AARP is pushing it, that you know, small businesses, again, a lot of them don't have the ability to offer 401ks and other things. So this would create a retirement for employees of businesses that don't have 401ks or pensions, et cetera.
And you're in favor of that?
No, we would
No,
not
you're
be.
not. So you're
Because it'd
against
be
the
a maintenance-
seniors. You're against the seniors.
yeah.
How can you go against the
Oh, heaven
seniors?
forbid. And the seniors were heavily for paid leave, so they were going against small business. And minimum wage, for that matter. So I think those are two that definitely will be front and center moving into next year. I think we'll see what the governor, his agenda. He has a big sway, and the budget becomes
Right.
less of a state fiscal plan and more of a policy agenda document. So we'll see what he has to do. And plus, we have so many uncertainties, even outside of Election Day, with scandals and people getting in trouble. So we'll see what Albany looks like.
Yeah, and these legislative bad apples, it's not just legislative anymore.
No.
They're throughout the system. And
Absolutely.
do you have a thought or comment you want to offer on that?
Well, I just that part of our agenda has been the need for transparency and the need for a clear, consistent metrics of success, benchmarks, if you will, on economic development. Over the last few years, it's exploded. We're spending about $8-9 billion a year of taxpayer money on economic development, to still rank 49th, mind you. So these type of efforts shouldn't be shrouded in secrecy. They should be out and open. They should be subject to audits.
Now, you worked in the Pataki administration. How does the Cuomo administration compare to Pataki's? Pataki, I've always known as, when he was governor, like the second floor was walled off. You couldn't get through to, look around even and tour. I mean, that second floor was Fort Pataki. And then the Governor Cuomo opened it up. But, do you see the transparency, the difference in transparency from one administration to the other?
Well, I'm going to be biased because I worked
Right.
for Governor Pataki, but I think that the
Well, that's
ability
why
to
I'm
walk,
asking
right,
you,
the ability to walk the halls and look at a lot of the beautiful architecture and paintings on the wall versus transparency in governing and in developing and implementing policy are very different things. I think that the governor, he operates in a way that is not necessarily that transparent in the way they work with things.
Governor Cuomo.
Correct.
But Governor Pataki did?
Well, I believe so because I
Okay.
worked there.
No, but you saw it from the inside.
Right.
That's why I'm asking.
I do. I think that they
As-
brought in all sides. I think we did a good job to try to bring in both sides in and to find that middle ground. I think the governor did that. Governor Cuomo did that his first few years, but he's lost his way and doesn't do that quite as well.
Okay, so he lost his way faster than his father lost his way?
Yeah,
and
that seems to
Something
be.
like that? Okay. Does this make it more difficult or easier for you to make your case, given the lack of transparency or whatever? I mean, does it make you just work harder?
It did. It makes work hard. I can't think of any constituency, and you would probably have had a lot of folks that represent a lot of different interests that have similar jobs to mine, trying to move an agenda and having members. Small business is the essential fabric of
Yeah.
every community, and they're terribly important for us. And so it does. I mean, the more you're going to shut out and the more you're going to change your way, I'm going to work that much harder and be that much more emboldened to get their message out. So it doesn't faze me.
It doesn't faze you?
If they're not going to listen, we have opportunities to come on shows like this and use the media, and there is a legislative branch of government, so we can work through that and let our members' voices be heard.
Okay, well,
Very good.
We're out of
Excellent.
time,
Well, you're
yeah.
doing an excellent job. I agree with you that the small business is the backbone of America, and I don't know, I hope it's not withering, but in any case, it should grow. With your help, it will grow, and continue to do your work with good success.
yeah.
All right, thank you very much.
Continued success.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming on.
Thank you.